Hello, and welcome to Ancient Stories in English. This channel tells history slowly and clearly so you can practice your English. Today, we are going to talk about light. Not the light on your phone, not the light in your room. We are going to talk about the very first time humans learned to push back the darkness and the long journey that followed. Because the story of electricity is not just a science story, it is a human story. It is about fear and curiosity and the slow, patient work of people who wanted to understand something they could not yet explain. Now let us begin. Imagine a night with no electricity, no streetlights, no phone screen, no lamp in the corner of the room, just darkness. Now imagine that you are sitting with a small group of people. In the middle of your group there is a fire. The fire is small. It gives light, but only for a short distance. Beyond that light, there is nothing. Only dark. This was life for most of human history. For thousands of years, fire was the only tool humans had to push back the darkness. And they learned to use it very carefully. They learned which wood burned longer. They learned how to carry fire from one place to another without losing it. They learned how to keep it alive through rain, through wind, through long, cold nights. The word keep is important here. To keep something means to hold it, to protect it, to make sure it does not disappear. Humans learned to keep the light alive. But fire could only do so much. The circle of light it gave was small, and the world outside that circle was still controlled by something much bigger. For thousands of years, the sun decided everything. When the sun rose, people woke up. They worked, they traveled, they built, they traded. When the sun went down, most of that stopped. Courts of law stopped hearing cases. Markets closed. Factories, in later centuries, could not operate safely. Surgeons could not perform difficult operations. Sailors became much more careful or stopped moving entirely. The night was not just dark. It was a limit, a boundary, a wall that humans could not pass through. Think about what that means. Every single day, for all of human history up to a certain point, the world stopped. Not because people wanted it to stop, but because the light was gone. Fire helped, candles helped, oil lamps helped. Over centuries, humans became very clever at producing small amounts of light in the darkness. But small light is not the same as enough light. A candle can help you read a book. It cannot light a street. It cannot keep a factory running. It cannot stop the world from slowing down when the sun disappears. To do that, something much more powerful was needed. And that something already existed. It had existed long before humans understood it. It lived in the sky. Before electricity was understood, it was feared. Every culture in the world had a story about lightning. In ancient Greece, it was the weapon of Zeus. In Norse mythology, it belonged to Thor. In many parts of Asia and Africa, lightning was seen as a sign from the sky, a message, a warning, or a punishment. And it is easy to understand why. Lightning appears without warning. One moment the sky is dark, the next moment, a line of light tears across the entire sky, brighter than any fire, faster than any eye can follow. And then it disappears, just as quickly as it came. That was perhaps the most frustrating thing about lightning. For early humans, fire you could hold, you could carry it, feed it, keep it alive. But lightning, you could not touch it, you could not capture it, you could not control it. The word control means to have power over something, to decide when it starts, when it stops, and how it behaves. Humans could control fire, but they could not control lightning. So for a long time, they simply watched it and feared it. But eventually, as always happens in history, someone decided that fear was not enough. Someone decided to ask a question instead. What is this thing? And can we understand it? The year was 1752. The man was Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was already famous in the American colonies, not as a scientist, but as a writer, a businessman, and a thinker. He was curious about almost everything. And in the middle of the 18th century, he became very curious about lightning. At the time, many educated people already suspected that lightning might be connected to what they called electrical fire, a force that scientists had been studying in laboratories for several decades. Mole experiments had produced sparks and shocks. But no one had proven that the great lightning in the sky was the same thing as the small sparks in a laboratory. Franklin wanted to test this idea. The experiment he is most famous for is simple in description but dangerous in practice. He flew a kite during a thunderstorm. Attached to the string of the kite was a metal key, and attached to the key was a thin piece of wire connected to a jar, a device used at that time to store electrical charge. When lightning passed near the kite, the charge traveled down the wet string to the key and into the jar. The jar collected it. Franklin touched the key. He felt a shock. Lightning and electricity were the same thing. This was not just a scientific discovery. It was a change in how humans understood the world. Lightning was not a weapon from the gods. It was not a mystery beyond human understanding. It was a force. And forces, if you study them long enough, can be understood. The word conduct appeared in Franklin's work. To conduct electricity means to allow it to move through something. Metal, he learned, conducts electricity very well. This is why he put a metal key on the string. Franklin had made first contact. He had not yet learned to create electricity. But he had proven that it was real, that it was natural, and that it could be studied. The next step would take another century. Michael Faraday was born in 1791 in London, England. His family was poor. He had almost no formal education. As a young man, he worked as a bookbinder, someone who makes and repairs books. But while he was binding books, he was also reading them. Every book that passed through his hands, he read. And slowly, he taught himself science. Eventually, he found work as a laboratory assistant to a famous chemist named Humphrey Davy. And from that small beginning, Faraday became one of the most important scientists in history. His great discovery came in 1831. Before Faraday, scientists knew that electricity existed. They could store small amounts of it. They could move it through metal, but they could not make it. Not in any useful quantity, not reliably, not consistently. Faraday discovered something extraordinary. He discovered that if you move a magnet near a coil of wire, electricity begins to flow through the wire. Movement creates electricity. This sounds simple, but think about what it means. Before this discovery, electricity came from the sky or from chemical reactions in early batteries, sources that were limited, unreliable, or impossible to control. After this discovery, electricity could be generated. That is the word. To generate means to produce, to create, to make something exist that was not there before. If you can move a magnet, you can generate electricity, and magnets can be moved by wind, by water, by steam, by any force that produces movement. Faraday had not just discovered a fact about electricity, he had found the door. Before this, electricity appeared only in moments, in a storm, in a spark, in a flash that no one could hold. After this, it could exist whenever humans needed it. That is the difference between something that happens to you and something you can create. The generator, the device built on Faraday's principle, would eventually power the entire modern world. Every power station that exists today in every country operates on the same basic idea that Faraday demonstrated in a small London laboratory in 1831. He had done something that seemed impossible before. He had learned to create what humans had only ever feared or observed. Once humans could generate electricity, a new question appeared. Not can we make it, that was answered. The new question was, how far can we send it? This question drove one of the most famous disagreements in the history of science and business. It happened in the late 1800s, mostly in the United States. And it involved two men with very different answers. Thomas Edison believed in direct current DC. In direct current, electricity flows in one direction, like water moving steadily through a pipe. Edison had built his entire business on this system. And it worked. It lit real offices, on real streets, in real cities. People could see the difference it made. But it could not travel very far. Direct current loses energy as it moves. Over long distances, most of the power disappears before it arrives. This meant that Edison's system needed a power station every few kilometers. In a dense city, this was possible. But it was expensive, and it left everywhere else in the dark. Nikola Tesla had a different idea. Tesla believed in alternating current, AC. In alternating current, the electricity does not flow in one direction. It changes direction, back and forth, many times every second. This sounds strange. It sounds like it should not work. But it could travel hundreds of kilometers through cables and still arrive with most of its power intact. The word transmit is useful here. To transmit something means to send it from one place to another. Edison's system had great difficulty transmitting electricity over long distances. Tesla's system was built for exactly that. Edison's system could light a city. Tesla's system could reach the places that had never had light before. Small towns, farms, villages, far from any power station. The disagreement between these two men was not simply about which system was more clever. It was about a much bigger question: who gets to have light? Eventually, alternating current won, not because Edison was wrong about his science, but because the world needed electricity to travel, and Tesla's system could do that. The question of how far had been answered. Now the only question left was, what happens when the lights actually turn on? Before that question was fully answered, something happened that changed how people saw electricity forever. The year was 1882. The place was Pearl Street in Lower Manhattan, New York City. Thomas Edison had built a power station. It was not large by modern standards. It served a small area, only a few city blocks. And on the evening of September 4th, it was switched on. One by one, electric lights came on in the offices and buildings of Pearl Street. This had happened before in small demonstrations, but not like this. Not in a real neighborhood, not in buildings where people actually worked and lived. The people who witnessed it described the light as extraordinary. Not because it was bright, though it was, but because of what it was not. It was not fire, it did not flicker, it did not produce smoke. It did not need to be fed or maintained through the night. You did not worry that the wind would extinguish it. You pressed a switch, and the light came on. And when you wanted it to stop, you pressed the switch again, and the light went off. Control, complete, simple, reliable control, something that had never existed before in the history of artificial light. Within months, other cities began building their own systems. Within years, the idea had spread across the United States and into Europe. Within decades, electric light had changed the shape of cities themselves. Buildings could be taller because they did not depend on natural light from windows. Streets could be safer. Work could continue after dark. The night was no longer a wall. It was simply the time after the day, nothing more. Let us return to where we began. That small fire, that small circle of light in the darkness. Humans spent thousands of years perfecting the art of keeping light alive. They learned which materials burned. They learned how to build lamps that used oil. They learned how to make candles that lasted through the night. All of that work, all of those thousands of years was about keeping something, holding onto light before it disappeared, fighting against the darkness one small flame at a time. What changed with electricity was not just the brightness. What changed was the relationship. Before electricity, humans responded to darkness. They worked around it. They prepared for it. Every evening, across every civilization in history, people made the same calculation. How much light do we have and how long will it last? After electricity, that calculation disappeared. You did not need to prepare. You did not need to store light like food for winter. You did not need to worry that your fire might go out, or that your oil might run out, or that the wind might take the flame. You could generate it whenever you needed it, as much as you needed. The darkness had not disappeared. Look outside on any clear night, and you will still see the dark sky, the stars, the ancient emptiness that humans have always looked up at. But the darkness no longer controlled what humans could do. It no longer decided when the day ended, when the market closed, when the surgeon put down his tools, when the child stopped reading. This doesn't feel like a lesson about electricity. It feels like a story about how humans slowly refused to stay in the dark. For the first time in history, humans no longer waited for the sun. Look at a photograph of Earth taken from space at night. You will see the dark oceans, the dark forests, the vast dark spaces between mountains and rivers. And then you will see the light. Cities glowing, coastlines outlined in brightness, highways traced in yellow and white across entire continents. That light, all of it, follows the same path. It begins with a magnet moving inside a coil of wire, in a power station somewhere you will never visit. The electricity is generated. It is transmitted across cables, over mountains and under rivers, into your city, your street, your building, your room. And when you press a switch, it arrives. In that moment, without thinking about it, you are connected to something that took all of human history to build. A small fire in the dark, a kite in a storm, a magnet moving near a wire, a switch being pressed on Pearl Street. First, humans learned how to keep a small fire alive. Then, they learned how to bring the light back whenever they wanted. And in that moment, pressing a simple switch in a dark room, the darkness is still there, but it no longer decides anything. Thank you for listening to Ancient Stories in English. If this story was useful for your English learning, please share it with someone who might enjoy it. And we will see you in the next story.